Chapter 21. With her 3 brothers away for the next day or so, Meredith didn't have anything else to do, so they decided to visit Jade so Daric could do more work with her. While Jade and Daric continued their research, Meredith sat in her corner of the lab, watching them as Daric tried to explain to her the nature of his powers. Jade seemed pretty engrossed at whatever the warlock was saying as she took down notes and asked questions. Too engrossed it seemed to. Sebastian frowned as he sat down next to Meredith, his eyes trained with laser focus on Jade and Daric. "Can the testosterone, will ya?" she said. "You know she only has eyes for you." "Yeah, well, normally she'd be all over me. She barely noticed I'm here," he said, pouting. "Please, she used to be worse. Lara said she would forget to shower when she went on her science benders." "At least I know I don't have to worry about him either," Sebastian said, eyeing her meaningfully. "What do you mean? Wait, never mind, she told you." Meredith's face soured. "Are you going to give me a lecture too? About how he's a warlock and our enemy and can't be trusted?" "What, me give a lecture to someone?" he laughed. "What is it with you Lycans? And warlocks and witches? Anyway, I don't care about that shit. Seems to me Daric is trying to make up for past sins. Plus he didn't want to do any of those things that asshole Stefan made him do." "You have a point, I guess," she said glumly. "But still, no one's gonna be happy. Fucking hell, Meredith, you gonna let other people dictate how you feel for anyone?" Meredith swallowed a gulp. What did she feel for Daric? His confession had been intense, but he didn't say anything directly about his feelings. "Of course, I'd be careful about letting Vrost know. You know he's going to shit a brick when he finds out." She asked, cocking her head at him. Nick did seem to have a particular hatred for Daric. Why, she didn't know. Hoping to put Sebastian out of his misery, she cleared her throat to get her friend's attention. "Sebastian," Jade said in a surprised voice when her gaze landed on him. "I didn't hear you come in. You should have said something. You were busy." Cranky pants dragon," she giggled as she wrapped her arms around his middle and laid her head on his chest. Sebastian drew her into his embrace and kissed the top of her head. "Ready to go soon, darlin'? I thought I'd take you out to dinner tonight. Somewhere so fancy and snooty we'll have to stop by somewhere else to get more food to take home." Jade looked over to Daric, who gave them a nod. "Of course, let me grab my things." She disappeared into her office and came back to the main lab with her coat and purse. "I'll see you in the morning, maybe?" "Sure," Meredith said. "Have fun, you two. We'll close up here." With one last wave and a nod from Sebastian, the couple left the lab. Meredith let out a sigh. Jade and Sebastian had fought hard for each other, and their journey was long but the reward well deserved. She was glad they had each other. "If I could use my powers," Daric began, "I could take you anywhere for a meal. We could have the finest meal in Paris, London, or Shanghai. Anywhere your heart desired." "I don't care about that, Daric," she said, placing a hand on his arm. He frowned. "Still, you deserve that and more." "Well, how about I take you to the finest employee cafeteria in New York?" She offered him her arm. With a smile, he took her arm. "Lead the way." Meredith locked up the lab, and they took the elevator down to the employee cafeteria, which actually was quite excellent. There was a wide variety of food, all free, and if there was something you wanted, most of the chefs were happy to whip it up if they had the ingredients. After picking up their food, they walked over to the group of tables in the corner. Meredith put her tray heaping with food on the table in front of her as she sat down, sliding into the bench, while Daric sat opposite to her. "So," he began, "is this our first date?" She laughed. "I guess so, but we've already gotten over the awkward stage by having sex, so this is probably 90% better than most of the other dates I've been on." She took a spoonful of fried rice and swallowed. "Not that I've been on many." She reached over and took his hand. He looked around them. At this time the cafeteria was mostly empty, but there were still a couple of employees lingering. "Are you sure this is wise? You know many Lycans here still despise me." "I'm not exactly winning any popularity contests," she replied. "Although you know Nick Vrost'll probably blow a gasket." Daric winced, a gesture she didn't miss. "Care to tell me what that beef is about?" The warlock sighed. "I'll understand if you feel differently after this, but it's better you hear it from me and not anyone else." Before Stefan revealed himself to the Lycans, he had Katie framed for crimes against the New York clan. And then had her kidnapped. Victoria and I kidnapped her. He paused. His plan was to have Katie and I produce the next generation of witches and warlocks who could be turned into mages. That plan didn't work out, obviously. But you can see why Nick Frost would hate me. Would you have done anything? She asked. He looked away. I would not have forced myself on her if that's what you're asking, he said, his voice raising slightly. But I would have done anything to protect my mother and prevent Stefan from killing or hurting Katie in other ways. Meredith grew silent, and when she didn't say anything, Daric withdrew his hand from hers. Hey, she called softly, catching his hand back. I'm not judging your past and what Stefan made you do. Are you angry? Angry, she asked. I'm fucking furious. Furious at Stefan. He really will do anything to defeat the Lycans. His hatred knows no bounds, Daric commented. Look, nothing happened, right? With you and Katie, I mean. No, he replied. But there are other things that I've done that I'll never be able to atone for. Meredith looked at him. Listen to me. I've done some things I'm not proud of. No, don't even think of telling me they're not the same as yours. As not a contest of who did worse. But what I'm trying to say is that we can't dwell on the past but move on forward. Do what we can to make up for past fuck-ups. Sounds like good advice, he said, raising a brow at her. She knew what he meant by that look, of course. Could she ever forgive herself for causing Archie's death? Yeah, maybe I should take it. Daric stood up and then sat down next to her, nudging her over to make room for himself. You are very smart, Mage. I will do my best if you promise to do the same. I will, she replied. Good. He drew her close and kissed her cheek. Now let us finish our meal, so we can go back upstairs. Meredith's brothers arrived late in the afternoon the next day. When she and Daric walked into their suite, she immediately saw the tablet PC on the coffee table. That's it, she said. I can't be sure it's the same one, but it's similar. We found it exactly where you said it would be, Killian said. Along with our files. He handed Meredith a brown envelope. Thank you, she said, taking it from him, staring at her name handwritten in ink on the flap. We all looked at our files, Quinn informed her. And though we didn't share details, we didn't find anything solid that could lead us to Archie's killer. What about the tablet? It has a lock on it. A simple 4-digit combination. Quinn picked up the tablet. I'm gonna run a couple of programs on it to try and figure out the code. We should have it in a few hours. 12/13, Meredith blurted out. What? December 13th. That was her birthday. Jenny, his wife, Meredith explained. Try it. Quinn shrugged and tapped the combination on the screen. Son of a bitch, he cried as the display came to life. He didn't like tech, but he loved her, Killian said. Is there anything interesting on there? Quinn's eyes narrowed at the screen. There's nothing on here. No apps, no documents. Except this. He turned the screen to them. There was a single video file. Go on. Open it, Killian urged. Quinn tapped the icon, which expanded and filled the screen with black. A few seconds later, Archie's face appeared on the screen. Play it, Meredith said quietly. Quinn propped the tablet against a stack of magazines on the table, and they gathered around it. With a deep breath, he tapped on the play button. On the screen, Archie sat in his study, facing the tablet's camera. Killian, Quinn, Connor, Meredith, he began. Whichever one of you found this. Or maybe all of you did. But anyway, if you're watching this, then I'm probably dead. Meredith gasped, and Daric put an arm around her. I'm so sorry, Archie continued. Meredith ran away a couple of months ago. And it was all my fault. She saw the files, maybe you all have seen yours, too. She thought I had been collecting you. And she was right. The three lone wolves looked at each other, and the tension in the air grew thick. You see, it all began 22 years ago, he said. My Jenny and I were never blessed with children, and we were desperate to adopt. She was a Lycan. Like you, as you know. We heard of a young Lycan boy whose entire clan had been wiped out in a mysterious attack. All dead except this innocent boy. We wanted to raise him and petitioned our Alpha and the High Council, but they denied us. Jenny was distraught. She asked around and no one could tell us Who took him in or why our request was denied when this boy obviously needed a home. As far as we knew, he had disappeared into thin air. She was heartbroken, convinced that something was wrong. She died before she found out. And I vowed I would find him. And so I did. I found him. I found Killian. Meredith's head snapped to Killian. What was? Shoo. Let's keep watching. And you all know I don't have to explain how I found all of you. Even Meredith. I kept my ears open for Lycan children disappearing or clans leaving pups behind with no one to care for them. I don't know what it meant, but I kept digging. I have my suspicions, but I can't be sure. I've kept my ears to ground, and I've heard rumblings about mages and witches and such. Things are not as they seem. I'm headed to New York. I told you I'm going there. Because of Meredith. I may try to see her, but I have a feeling she's safe where she is. But that's not the real reason. He let out a long breath. I'm going to meet with a contact of mine, someone connected to the council. But I have a bad feeling about this. I can't explain it. But if you're watching this, and something has happened to me, I hope first and foremost you forgive me for keeping this from all of you. I was only trying to protect you. Don't try and find out what happened to me, but if you want to help me find out what happened to you and what could have happened to all the Lycan children. The population of lone wolves has increased in the past 2 decades, and no one else has noticed. I think, well, he shrugged. But I'm probably just some paranoid old man. I can't believe I'm recording this. He reached over to the front of the screen and it turned black. Meredith felt the tears roll down her cheeks and she buried her face in Daric's chest. Killian rose from the couch, running his hands through his hair in frustration as Quinn stared at the screen, his face in shock. Connor, on the other hand, slammed his fist into the wall, leaving a dent. Killian finally spoke. The fucking council. They did this to Archie. They did this to us, Meredith said bitterly. They did something to our families and clans, so we would. We don't know that yet, Killian said. But we need to find out. What are we going to do? Quinn asked. We should get out of here now. I agree, Connor said. We don't know if we can trust anyone now. He eyed Daric suspiciously. No. We can trust the New York clan, Meredith said. We can trust Grant Anderson. How the hell would you know that, Meredith? Connor asked. They locked you up in here, making you work for them and risk your life, and you want us to trust them. Look, I made my bed and now I gotta lie in it, she protested, standing up and crossing her arms. But I have this feeling I think Grant will help us. There is something fishy going on with the High Council. He'll want to know and put a stop to them. Fucking Christ, listen to yourself, Meredith, Connor growled. As he approached her, Daric quickly stepped in front of him. Don't, the warlock warned him in a deadly voice. I'm not gonna hurt her, asshole, Connor bit back. Now you, on the other hand. Daric. Connor. Stop it, Meredith cried. Killian, she pleaded to the other. Lycan. We can't take on the council alone. You know that. The dark-haired Lycan sighed. Fine, we'll go to Grant. Chapter 26. Having been to Grant Anderson's office several times now, transporting there was an easy task. He just had to make sure he picked a spot that was clear of furniture or other people, lest he accidentally appear inside a sofa or table. Not the most pleasant thing in the world, or another person definitely unpleasant and unsurvivable for both parties. He decided that just outside the office would be best, as he guessed the Alpha's office would be filled with people. As he appeared in the Fenrir Executive Office's waiting room, Grant's admin, Jared, jumped out of his seat in surprise. My apologies, he said, nodding to the frightened Lycan. He strode to the door that led into Grant's office and walked in. He expected the different reactions, of course, and even anticipated their anger. Connor and Nick immediately attacked him, and though he was tempted to simply sweat them away, he knew he deserved their anger. Get them off him, Jade pleaded to the others. Nick managed to land a punch, which was a surprise, but Daric supposed it was a long time coming. Connor, on the other hand, wrapped his gigantic arms around him, restraining him and bringing him down to his knees. Did you find them? Where's Sebastian? Jade asked as she rushed to his side. Daric raised his head slowly. I did find them. And the Lycan's green eyes searched his face. Are they alive? Did you get them? He shook his head. I couldn't. Not by myself. While the rest of the Lycans and witches looked on, Grant stood up from his chair and walked over to him. Well, Warlock? Did you change your mind? Did you want that bracelet back on? I'm sorry for disappearing like that, he said apologetically. I know I broke your trust, but I had no choice. Please don't punish Dr. Cross for doing what she thought was right. Dr. Cross has been properly chastised, Grant replied, his eyes flickering. Over to the Lycan scientist. But you said you found them? Why didn't you bring them back right away? If you could kindly ask Connor to let me go, I can explain, Daric said. Patiently. We have no time to lose, he added when he saw the hesitation on Grant's face. Let him go, Connor, Grant ordered. The Lycan grunted but released Daric quickly. The Warlock dropped to the ground unceremoniously but quickly got up. As he brushed himself off, he felt all the eyes in the room on him. Well? Grant asked. He took a deep breath. I know where they are. Stefan has been hiding out in my old village in Norway. Daric explained to them what he had seen and what Stefan had done to ensure that Daric couldn't just sneak in and transport his prisoners away. We need to attack now, Nick said. While Stefan himself is vulnerable. But that's why he chose that place, Lara pointed out. He's only temporarily vulnerable. The northern lights should only affect his blessed powers. Being blood magic, the controlling spell seems to be unaffected if his puppet masters still have a hold over the humans and Lycans. We need to help the lone wolves, Killian added. If they're under some kind of spell, then you know they're innocent. Daric, Jade began. You told me that Stefan is the source of the power and puppet masters are only his conduits. Do you think he's particularly weak if he's being drained by both the controlling spell and the northern lights? I did not think of that, Daric said. But it's possible. Then all we have to do is kill Stefan, which may not even take a lot of effort, Jade hypothesized. If we can get past his army, Elena pointed out. We'll need our own army then, Grant said in a serious voice. He looked at Nick and Elena. Start making preparations. We're going to call every able-bodied Lycan in New York and our allies. Daric, he turned to the Warlock. How many people can you transport to your village at one time? Daric thought for a moment. I suppose I could move 5 to 6 people at a time. Good, Grant nodded. We need to get a move on then if we want to attack Stefan before daylight. Meredith sat in the hut alone, rubbing her hands over her arms as the cold crept over her. Her Lycan metabolism had been keeping her warm, but when the direness of the situation had dawned on her, nothing could stop the chill blasting through her veins. She realized where they were being held. It was obviously Daric and Signa's old village in Norway, where the Warlock and Mage first crossed paths. It was dark outside, which made it even harder to judge what time of the day it was. The eerie northern lights overhead made the entire place look creepy, like some damn horror movie, but that wasn't what made Meredith's skin crawl. It was the army of men waiting outside, standing still in the cold like a bunch of zombies. And then there were the wolves, Lycans by the size of them, surrounding the village, tied up to the wooden posts like dogs waiting to be unleashed. Stefan was well guarded, and even with Daric's powers and the New York Lycans, she doubted they would have enough resources to fight the mages and their army of human and Lycan slaves. She wondered where Stefan had taken Sebastian. It was a smart move on his part, taking Sebastian away, because all the Lycans needed to do was free him and unleash the dragon. Hopefully, he still wasn't under Stefan's control, but if the mages got a hold of Jade, then all bets were off. She hoped her best friend was safe somewhere. And then there was Zachary Frost. Stefan only needed threaten the child, and Nick Frost would give everything he had to keep his son safe. For once in her life, she was truly scared. Her she-wolf whined, trying to comfort her. I know, she said aloud. I'm trying not to lose hope. Think, the she-wolf said. What would Archie do? Archie would tell her not to give up. There was always a way. I've given you all the tools you need, Meredith, Archie said countless times. Think. She was tired. Bone tired. As soon as Stefan and Victoria had left, she searched every inch of the cabin, trying to find a weak spot or anything to help her get out. But there was nothing, they made sure of that. Just the furs on the ground and the single bed in the corner. She had nothing on her except the the tracking bracelet and Christ on a bicycle. Her hands crept up to her chest. The phone. She had forgotten she had it tucked away in her bra. Her hands trembled as she took it out and pressed the power button. Yes. She pumped her fist in the air as the phone turned on. Meredith took a deep breath. She would only have one chance at this, and the battery was near dead. There was no signal, of course, but most phones had a GPS unit. Hopefully, someone at Fenrir would be monitoring signals from all their registered phones. It was a long shot, but hopefully someone out there was listening. Chapter 27. It had taken another few hours or so, but the New York Lycans were able to mobilize their forces, and Daric began transporting them to the same hill overlooking the fjord. Every able-bodied member of the New York clan came, which amounted to about 40 in total, including the security team trainees, and a few clan members in the area who volunteered to come. 5 people from New Jersey arrived, plus Dante Maxino and Frankie Anderson. Connecticut had sent 10 of their own, including their current alpha Logan Cooper, while Philadelphia sent 6 of their best Lycan fighters. That was a force of about 60 plus Vivian, Lara, and Liam. They were going to battle 100 human slaves, 20 lone wolves, and another 20 mages who were probably armed to the teeth with various spells and potions. However, if all went as planned, then there would be no need to battle them head-on. The odds weren't in their favor, but they had the element of surprise on their hands. The Lycans set up a small camp in a clearing away from the edge of the hill. Grant stood in the middle talking to the team. "Have we got visual?" Grant asked Quinn. The younger man nodded, holding his tablet PC up. "The drones have just finished their survey and will remain in the air to monitor the area." "Awesome. Tech, by the way." Quinn grinned as he turned the screen to them. "Just as Daric said, there's about 100 or so humans and 20 Lycans scattered around them." Grant let out a breath. "Our main goal is to find Meredith, Sebastian, and Zach and get them out. Based on the layout, they could be in any of those huts. There are 20 homes total. Alina, Lara, and Liam's team will be split up into 3 for the retrieval purposes. Once the hostages have been found and retrieved, contact us through the comms. Hopefully we'll get to them before anyone notices." "Highly unlikely," Nick interjected, "which is why Alex and I will be leading our team to take out the puppet masters. There's no way we can defeat all of the human slaves. There are too many of them. Our only chance is to take the puppet masters down." He pointed to the black-robed figures on the edges of the village, facing the army of slaves and their backs to the shore. "Our best fighters, led by Connor, will distract the lone wolves on the front lines. If we catch them by surprise, we can stop them before they can mobilize the human forces. And once the hostages are safe and the puppet masters have been disabled," Daric began, "I will find Stefan and end him." "We both will," Grant said. They had planned it so Grant and Daric would be watching over the ridge, waiting for the signal that the hostages were safe. Once they were sure, Daric would transport them to wherever Stefan was, and they would end this tonight. "But we want to make sure the hostages are out of harm's way. We'll do our best not to hurt any of the innocent Lycans and people, but if push comes to shove, our people and the hostages come first." "All right, team," Grant said, checking his watch. "We have an hour until sunrise. Let's finish this." Daric watched as the Lycans made their preparations. Killian, Connor, and Quinn walked together, talking silently. As the best fighter, Connor was joining the main team that would attack the army head-on. Killian was on the retrieval team, while Quinn was going to remain behind to continuously monitor the situation and fly the drones to find Stefan. The 3 brothers clapped each other on the back, touching their foreheads together before they separated. Jade was also joining the retrieval team, and she was talking to an older man with graying hair. Eric, someone had called him, and based on the similar features, he guessed this was Jade's father. Frankie was talking to Grant, her arms wrapped around his waist. The alpha's stance was tense, his back stiff, but he stroked his mate's back in a tender manner. The Lupa was staying back to coordinate the teams, as although she was invulnerable, her advancing pregnancy made it difficult to move. Nick stood by himself in the corner, his face stony and hard. Vivian Chatrain had given Katie a potion to help her sleep, and so the beta's mate remained at Fenrir, unaware of what was going on. Liam and Lara, on the other hand, were standing silently under a tree, hands intertwined. This was it. He would do everything in his power to make sure Meredith and the others were safe, but the moment he saw an opportunity, he would kill Stefan. Alpha! Alpha! Quinn's voice rang through the silent clearing, his footsteps hitting the snow-covered ground in a rhythmic pattern as he ran back to Grant. What is it? The Alpha asked as he pulled away from his mate. I was running a last scan just in case the mages were using any sort of tech to help them out. Quinn fished his phone out of his pocket and held it up to Grant's face. Look. What is it? Grant asked, his brows drawing together. It's a GPS signal. From down in the village. What does it mean? Frankie asked. There's no cell signal out here. That's the thing. Quinn tapped on the phone. No one's phone is working out. Here I could barely get a signal from the sat phones. But something or someone is transmitting something from down there. Daric strode to Quinn and looked at the screen. Meredith, he said. She stole one of your phones, he said to Grant. I saw her the day after the car broke down. She didn't return the phone, but slipped it into her bra. That must be her, Quinn exclaimed. Good girl. I know where that is, he said, pointing to the red dot on the screen. That house is in the middle of the village. It belonged to one of our best hunters, Oscar. He was my father's best friend, and we spent a lot of time there. If we can locate her, then that's one less person we have to worry about. I can get in there, Daric said. I know the space. But you won't be able to get her out, Grant pointed out. You'd both be trapped. The Northern Lights. I didn't say I couldn't leave, Daric retorted. But transporting back and forth would drain me. I could probably only do it twice or thrice in a row. That would mean Stefan could get away, Grant said. If someone had asked him weeks ago to agree to such a plan, he would have laughed in their face. Stefan's demise had been his singular goal in life, but now things had changed. Protecting Meredith at all costs was his priority now. If Meredith, Sebastian, and Zach are there and I could take them to safety, then it would be worth it. I agree, Grant said. Stefan's death is not worth the lives of anyone. We will proceed with the plan, but once you have them out of there and we can reduce casualties, then we're out of here. Let's explain the modified plan to the team and get this show on the road. Chapter 28. Meredith stared at the phone, watching the battery meter slowly count down the power percentage until shut down. A cry ripped from her throat as the hope died along with the phone. This was it. If no one had found her signal, then she was as good as dead. She stood up and paced. She was out of tools. Like literally out of them. She only had the clothes on her back, and she doubted her t-shirt and leggings would be able to help her out of this one. Meredith threw herself on the bed, sobbing into the musty pillow. Don't lose hope, Minkshare. Meredith froze. She was dreaming. Her starving body was making her hear things. Stefan was sending her visions to drive her mad. Slowly she got up from the bed and turned around. Daric was standing in the middle of the room, his handsome face beaming at her. It took a second for it to register in her brain, but when it all clicked, she ran toward him, leaping up into his arms and wrapping her legs around him. She grabbed his face and planted a hard kiss on his lips. God, she missed him. She couldn't believe he was really here. Yes, it's me. He laughed as he gently pried Meredith away from him. She untangled herself from his body and stood in front of him. You're here, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I've come to rescue you, and he staggered forward and Meredith planted her palms on his chest to steady him. Daric, she cried. Are you all right? He nodded. I'm sorry. This place. It's your village, right? Yes, but that's not all. He quickly explained to her how the Northern Lights were affecting his powers. It's draining you, she asked. Not totally, but yes. I can only perform a few more spells before I need rest. Okay. Then what's the plan? Wait, this first. He bent down and waved his hand over her tracking bracelet. The band disappeared, and the device fell on the floor. Daric, she exclaimed. Why did you do that? Your powers. A small trick, he said with a smile. I'm conserving them as best as I can. Transporting takes the most out of me, but I can still do small things. You will need to defend yourself. Right. She took a deep breath. So now what? I was hoping that Sebastian and Zachary Ross were with you so I can take you all away. She shook her head. We've all been separated. They've got some special chain holding Sebastian down so he can't shift, and I haven't seen Zach since we were in Fenrir, but... She closed her eyes, trying to use her enhanced hearing to tune in. He's been crying, poor thing, but I think I know where he is. Northeast of us. Then we must go. He lifted his hand, but she stopped him. No, save it. We'll sneak out. Can you remove whatever it is that's blocking the door? He nodded and then walked to the front door, waving his hand. Grabbing the handle, he turned it and slowly opened the door. Meredith peered outside. There, she said, nodding towards one of the distant cabins. There was a faint light coming from the inside. We need to go there. That was our old home, Daric said through gritted teeth. Before Meredith could stop him, Daric grabbed her arm, and the coldness gripped her. A few seconds later, they reappeared inside another cabin. This one was much larger and had more furniture. A fire was blazing in the hearth, and there was a bed and a baby cot in the corner. A woman stood with her back to them, holding a bundle in her arms as she rocked back and forth. Stop crying, Victoria begged. Please, baby, stop. She turned around, her eyes growing wide and her face becoming even paler as she saw Daric and Meredith. You, she hissed. What are you, master? She screamed. Before Daric or Meredith could move, Stefan appeared on the opposite side of the room. Ah, my old protege, the master mage mocked. Looks like you freed your little bitch, I see. Let him go, Stefan, Daric said as he raised his hand. Or what? Stefan slowly walked towards the witch. Victoria, you know what to do. Yes, master. Victoria retrieved the knife strapped to her waist and pointed it at Zach. Move and he dies. Victoria moved the tip of the blade closer to the bundle, pointing it straight at Zach's heart. Daric lowered his hand. You truly are a monster, Victoria. No, Meredith yelped. You wouldn't. Zach let out another cry, and Meredith saw Victoria's hand shake and her face falter just for a second. He's your grandson, Meredith pleaded. Katie's son. Your own flesh and blood. Shut up, Victoria screeched. She pressed the tip against the baby's breastbone. I'll do it, I swear. Daric began to raise his hand and slowly advanced toward Stefan. You've drained yourself, Stefan. I can see your hands shaking. You've used too many spells, haven't you? Plus, all the puppet masters have been draining more and more of your power. Stop stalling, Stefan bellowed at the witch. Victoria's eyes went wild as she looked at Zach and then Stefan. Master. Kill the child, Victoria, Stefan ordered. Now. Victoria let out a wail and raised the knife. Meredith was about to scream for Victoria to stop, but her breath caught as she saw the witch fling the knife at Stefan. The master mage waved his hand, and the knife reversed its course, sending it straight to Victoria. The witch twisted away, shielding the baby as the knife buried into her back. With a sickening squish, she fell forward, and Meredith lunged for her, grabbing the bundle before Victoria fell. Tell Katie, Victoria choked, reaching out to Meredith with her hand. Tears burned in her eyes as she nodded. I will. Victoria's hand fell back and her eyes closed. Pity, Stefan declared. She was quite useful to me. Stefan, Daric yelled as he flung his hand toward the mage. Stefan was caught by surprise and his body was thrown against the wall. Is that all you've got? Stefan laughed as he brushed himself off and stood. What were you thinking? Coming here by yourself and trying to get your Lycan whore back? My men will be here in 2 seconds. I've already roused the army. No, Daric said with a smile. I'm not alone. Stefan was about to open his mouth when sounds of screams and shouts from the outside made his face twist in anger. What have you done? It's over, Stefan, Daric said. The Lycans and the witches are here. Stefan laughed. I don't think so. The doors behind them suddenly burst open, and 5 large men filed in, all carrying rifles. Behind them a giant black wolf padded in, fangs bared. Meredith's inner she-wolf howled, and she set little Zach down on the baby cot. She turned and then hunched herself in as the animal burst from her skin, her limbs and face elongated, her muscles and bones stretching, and fur sprouted all over her body. It all took a few seconds, but to Meredith it felt like an eternity. She landed on all 4 paws and stood in front of the other Lycan. She heard a gasp behind her, probably Daric, and she wasn't surprised. Her wolf was magnificent, all silver white fur and red eyes. She was the only albino Lycan in the world as far as she knew. The she-wolf growled at the humans, ignoring them as she advanced toward the other wolf. Daric took care of them anyway as their weapons jammed the moment they tried to use them on her. The two wolves were evenly matched, same height and weight, but Meredith had an advantage, of course. The child inside her would protect her, and she wasn't afraid of getting hurt, especially not when she was protecting those she loved. Her mate, her clan, her family. The black wolf lunged first, and she sprang at him, ripping with her claws and fangs. The other wolf's claws ripped down her face, sending the blood spurting and staining her snowy fur, but she ignored the pain. Instead she went straight for the neck, clamping her canines down on the flesh as hard as she could. The wolf let out a howl of pain and rolled away from her as soon as she released him. He limped away, dragging his body into the corner as he lay down and turned back into his human form. "Stefan," Daric called as the mage disappeared. "God damn it." He turned to the she-wolf, who had padded over to him and was licking his hand. "I must go," he said. "Take care of them for me, she-wolf." Without another word, he disappeared. The she-wolf whined and then turned around, running into the chaos outside. Inside her, Meredith railed and screamed, begging the wolf to go and find Daric. But the wolf didn't listen. Instead, she raised her head, sniffing the air as she tried to find a distinct scent, the scent of fire and ashes. Daric immediately knew where Stefan had disappeared to, or rather, the mage had told him, sending him a vision of where he was. As he focused on the exact place, he thought that it might be a trap. Perhaps it was, but one way or another this would end tonight. He appeared right on top of the cliff, the highest point overlooking their village. Here the northern lights seemed to burn much brighter, and he could feel its effect more prominently. He thought he had enough power for at least a few more spells, but he was almost tapped out. The cliffside point also offered a view of the action below, and it seemed Stefan had used the last of his powers to bring his remaining 4 mages and 6 of his human slaves with him. They stood to the side, ready to defend their master. "Ah, you've come," Stefan taunted as he looked at Daric. The mage struggled to get up, but he managed to get to his feet. "Your magic is almost gone," Daric stated. "And so is yours." "Get him," Stefan ordered. One of the mages stretched his hands out and began to chant. The human slave suddenly stood up straight and began to lumber towards Daric. Daric lunged towards Stefan, tackling him to the ground. He would kill Stefan with his bare hands if that's what it took. The master mage screamed in protest as Daric's heavy body landed on top of him, pinning him down. "Get him," Stefan managed to croak out as Daric's fingers wrapped around his throat. Daric squeezed as hard as he could, but the human slaves pulled him away. Before he could feel the last breath leave from Stefan's body, the 6 men restrained him, forcing him to his knees as the largest of them twisted his arms back before pushing him down on the ground. Stefan heaved as he tried to get up. "It is such a pity," he rasped as he slowly stumbled to Daric. "You could have been great, could have ruled by my side, but you throw it all away for a worthless little Lycan bitch." He looked at the man holding Daric down. "Kill him." A meaty arm wrapped around Daric's neck and tightened, squeezing the air out of him. As spots appeared in front of his eyes, his last thoughts were of Meredith and their unborn child. He wished he could have seen her future, if only to know what their offspring would look like. Probably beautiful like Meredith. "Stefan, you shithead." The sound of large wings flapping filled Daric's ears, and a large rush of wind knocked over both him and the man who had him in a chokehold. They rolled around several times, and when Daric ended up on top, he slammed his fist into the other man's face, knocking him out. Looking up, he saw a giant golden dragon flying overhead. Its wings slowed down, and the dragon swooped lower. A figure dropped to the ground, and he held his breath when he saw Meredith's body fall to the ground, transform in midair, and land on all fours. The magnificent white wolf stood in front of Stefan, growling and snapping, forcing the mage to retreat. Behind her, however, the remaining men advanced. One of them pulled a pistol from his pocket, and he trained it on the she-wolf. "No." Daric ran towards them. His magic was nearly tapped out, and he couldn't do anything to stop them or get her out of harm's way. One of them shot at the wolf, and she yowled in pain. She turned around, growling and advancing towards the men. She leaped at the man with the weapon, disabling him, but the rest piled on top of her, seemingly unafraid of the giant animal. The she-wolf let out a howl and shook them off her as they tried to hang on and wrestle her to the ground. Daric wanted to help Meredith, but Stefan stood between them. The mage raised his hand, preparing to use his last bit of magic to help his goons. "Stefan," he called, and the mage turned around. "Still alive? You've always been a survivor," Stefan said almost proudly. "Too bad though, I think you've used up your magic and your luck." Calling on the last reserves of his magic, Daric used it to transport the sword strapped to Stefan's side into his hand. "No, I think you've used up the last of yours." Daric raised the sword, pushing it straight forward into the mage's body. Stefan's eyes bulged in disbelief and his face scrunched in agony. As he screamed, "Kill them!" he ordered the remaining mages as he staggered back, blood dribbling from his mouth. "Kill them all." The 4 mages turned their attention to Daric and Meredith. The she-wolf had managed to knock away one of the men, but the remaining 4 circled her. The mage controlling the human slaves waved his hand, and 2 of the men walked away from the she-wolf and trudged towards Daric. The remaining mages slipped their hands into their robes, preparing what Daric knew were various potions that could disable both him and Meredith. "Traitor," Stefan hissed with the last of his breath. "If I die tonight, so will you." The winds picked up, getting stronger and faster, and Daric had to dig his heels in to keep steady. As he saw a flash of gold in the distance and heard the beating of wings, he knew what Sebastian was planning. "Meredith!" he screamed. The white wolf's ears perked up, and with one last growl she turned tail and dashed to Daric. When she was a few yards away, her hind legs gave one last push, and she lunged through the air to leap over Stefan's dying body and tackle Daric to the ground, rolling them away just in time as fire and lava rained from above. The heat was unbearable, and the smoke and ashes made his lungs burn, but at least they were alive. They both were. Warm fur and heavy muscle shrank back into soft skin and supple limbs. Daric used his body to shield her, landing with a thud on his back as Meredith slammed on top of him. "Oomph!" Meredith sputtered. She tried to look back but turned her head away. The light burning from the dragon fire was blinding, and Daric himself closed his eyes until the heat faded away. "Is he?" Daric opened his eyes slowly. The faint light of dawn was slowly creeping across the sky as the sun rose from behind the hills. Turning his head to the side, there was nothing but ashes by the edge of the cliff. "Yes, it is done." Meredith let out a whoop of triumph and pumped a fist high in the air. "We did it." "Hey!" She looked down and raised a brow at him. "Are you getting a victory, boner?" He laughed. "You are naked and bouncing on top of me," he pointed out. "Right." Meredith slowly eased off him and got to her feet. She bent down to help him up, and he accepted her hand. As soon as he stood up, however, Meredith let out an indignant cry. "Daric," she sobbed, tears filling her eyes. You're... What is it?" he asked, running his hands over his body. "Am I injured? Should we get a doctor?" "No," Meredith cried. "Your hair." Daric frowned and touched his head, running his fingers through his hair. He realized that it must have caught some of the dragon fire, as half of his long locks had been singed off. "New," she bawled. "Your beautiful hair." Daric chuckled. "Minkjer, it is just hair." "Just hair," she cried. "Just hair? Don't you know how much I love that hair of yours? It'll take years to grow back." "I'm a warlock," he reminded her. "I could learn to regrow it back if you wish." "Really? Really? Good." She reached up and kissed him. "Now let's go back to the village and see what's going on." "As much as I love seeing your delectable body," he said as he began to unbutton his shirt, "I'd rather keep the image to myself." He handed her his shirt and she accepted, slipping it over herself. "Thanks," she said. Suddenly her eyes grew wide. Speaking of naked bodies, Daric pivoted his head and saw Sebastian walking towards them, a scowl on his face and naked as the day he was born. He looked back at Meredith, and when he saw her eyes slowly dropping lower, he pulled her face to his chest. "A little help?" Sebastian asked. Daric nodded, and with the wave of his hand, the grass around Sebastian's feet floated up, swirled around his torso, and the fibers changed into a pair of white boxers. "Thanks," he said gratefully. "Sebastian, my man, High five. Meredith bounded to him, her hands raised. Flying was so fun. Let's do it again. What do you say? I'm not letting you anywhere near my dragon, Sebastian huffed. No more dragon rides, she pouted. Never again. What the hell were you doing, tugging and pulling on my horns? I was trying to steer. I was steering, you idiot, he growled. Oh, and by the way, you're welcome for the rescue. Thank God my she-wolf was smart enough to come and find you first. That makes one of you, Sebastian snorted. Did you see what you did to Daric's beautiful hair? She countered. I have to go see Jade, he said, ignoring her. He looked down at his boxers. Shit. I should have asked you to make me some stretchy pants like the Hulk. Don't want to show up buck naked in front of everyone. I'll see if I can walk. Back down. We'll follow, Daric said. But I need a few minutes alone with Meredith. Sebastian nodded and turned to walk away. Meredith suppressed a giggle when she saw what was printed on the back of Sebastian's boxers. It was a unicorn, in bright shades of pink and purple. You're so bad, she whispered, swatting him playfully on the arm. Since you seem to enjoy his body so much, I thought I'd give you something better to look at. And no one calls you idiot and gets away with it. Ha! That'll teach him. She laid her head on his chest as Daric's arms came around her. She breathed in his chocolate scent and murmured against his bare skin. Did you say something, Minkshare? I said. She looked up at him. I love you, Daric. His blue-green eyes turned from stormy to calm, and a smile tugged at his lips. And I love you, my she-wolf. Their lips met in a soft kiss as the sun continued to ascend, filling the valley with light. When they had enough of each other, for now at least, they pulled away and started walking towards Sebastian, who was trying to figure out how to get down from the cliff. Let's go, Daric said, offering his hand to the other man. I'll take us back. Chapter 29. The three of them appeared right in the middle of the village. While it was not as chaotic as it was just hours ago, the scene was certainly grim. Grant was kneeling next to a Lycan who was lying on the ground, his chest wrapped in bandages, comforting him as an older man tended to his injuries. You'll be fine, Patrick. Dr. Faulkner will take care of you, he said, clapping the man on the shoulder gently. Jared will be happy to know you'll be coming home soon. Thank you, Primal, Patrick replied. It's an honor to serve you. Grant gave the man a nod and got to his feet. Beside him, Frankie helped him up and then wrapped her arm around his waist, snuggling into his side. Meredith. Sebastian. Daric. Grant's face lit up. Thank God. He looked at Daric. Is it done? He's gone. Daric nodded. Yes, Alpha. And I made doubly sure, Sebastian added. I don't think anyone can come back from being turned into ash. Grant broke into a smile, and he hugged Frankie closer to him. Tears were streaming down the lupus face. It's over, she whispered, her hand slipping down to cup her growing belly. It's finally over. Meredith. Daric saw the three lone wolves running towards them. Connor's strides were much longer than his brother's, so he reached Meredith first. He scooped her up into a fierce hug and kissed her forehead. Mare, he breathed, closing his eyes. Ah, Connor, Meredith said as he let her go. I love you too, you big lug. Killian came next, and he lifted her up into his arms. I'm so glad you're safe, he whispered into her hair. Hey, Runt, Quinn greeted, his face beaming. I think if something did happen to you, I'd miss your ugly face. Oh wow. Shut up, Meredith said as she launched herself into his arms. I was worried about you too. Quinn's face faltered for a second as he hugged Meredith. Yeah, well, don't think I'll be around to help you next time you're in trouble. He released her and looked at Sebastian. Jesus Christ, you really are a motherfucking dragon. I told you, but you wouldn't listen, Meredith said, giving him a shove. I thought you were joking. Son of a bitch. All of them turned towards the source of the cry of frustration, who was stomping towards them. Elena's face was drawn into a scowl as Alex ran behind her. He, on the other hand, looked ecstatic. What's wrong? Grant asked his sister. What's wrong? What's wrong? She fumed, opening her jacket and showing everyone her shredded and bloody shirt. She lifted up the torn fabric, showing the smooth, unmarred skin. I'm pregnant. Again, she moaned. Hey, baby doll, don't be blue, Alex said as he came up behind her, pressing A kiss to her cheek. Mika will love having a baby brother or sister. I really didn't want to spend another Christmas pregnant, Elena whined. Do you know how much wine I'll be missing? And eggnog? And vodka? And Alex kissed his wife to quiet her down. Sebastian. Jade was running toward them at full speed. She launched herself at her mate, who caught her and spun her around and planted a long kiss on her mouth. I thought, she choked, barely containing the tears and emotions. I'll always come back to you, darlin', he drawled, drawing her into his arms. Always. Lara and Liam approached them, the witch's face grim. Daric, Meredith, she called. We can't find Zach. Nick's been going crazy looking for him. Meredith looked around. I put him down in the cot. Let's go get him. As they walked towards his old home, Daric tensed. So many memories, so many words unspoken. As his steps faltered, Meredith threaded her fingers through his. You can do this, she whispered. He gripped her hand tight, and they walked inside. It was just as he remembered. His parents' bed in the corner, and his own twin bed in the other. And the cot where Zach lay sleeping was the same one his father made, with his bare hands and not with magic. A father should be able to build things for his child, Jonas said as they put the baby cot in the storage shed in the back. I'll teach you how to make one of these so that someday you can make one for your son too. Victoria's body remained crumpled on the floor by the cot. He shook his head. Poor misguided Victoria. Still, in the end, she did save her grandson's life. With a wave of his hand, her body disappeared. Victoria's favorite place was the gardens in Stefan's mountain retreat in Colorado, and so he sent her remains there, burying her under an oak tree. A soft cry drew his attention back, and he looked at Meredith as she picked up Zach. He imagined her doing the same to their child, and emotion welled up in him. It was real. This was all real. No more mages, no more Stefan, no more danger looming over their heads. Only Meredith from now on and their child. And many more children if he were blessed. Their love was like the sun, bringing light into the dark world he thought he would be living in until he died. Zach. Nick's urgent voice knocked him out of his thoughts. Where is he? Is he safe? He's fine, Meredith said. He just woke up. Nick strode to Meredith, freezing as his eyes zeroed in on the squirming bundle in her arms as if he wasn't sure if it was true. As he took Zach from Meredith, his expression turned to that of relief, as if the weight of the world had lifted from his shoulder. He leaned down and took in the scent of his son kissing the baby's chubby cheeks. Hi there, Zach, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. I've missed you. Mommy's missed you too. She'll be so happy to see you. Zach gurgled back happily. Nick looked up at Meredith and then to Daric. Thank you, he said, clearing his throat. And I apologize for everything. The beta smiled, a genuine one. That Daric was sure didn't come easily to the stoic Lycan. Daric nodded in acknowledgement and Meredith smiled. You're welcome, she replied, and then took a deep breath. Wait, Nick, she called as the beta was about to leave. There's something you need to know. About Victoria. What about her? Nick asked, his voice a low growl. She saved Zach from Stefan. She asked that I tell Katie she loved her. Nick's face was inscrutable, but he nodded. Katie will want to know Zach is safe. I'll call her now. He pulled Zach closer to his chest and left the hut. Meredith looked down at the empty cot, her hands running lovingly over the wood. Daric walked to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. This was yours, wasn't it? But she posed it like it was a statement, not a question. My father made it himself, he confirmed. He pushed her hair aside and nuzzled her neck, letting the scent of wildflowers tickle his nose. Can we come back here another time? She asked as she turned around to face him. I'd like to explore the area. Maybe you can show me where you grew up. You only have to ask, Minkshare. Epilogue. 1 month later. This is definitely the Disney princess wedding to beat all Disney princess weddings, Jade said, her eyes wide as she took in all the decorations. Where did you find a 10-foot-tall stuffed unicorn? Wait, never mind. She shook her head. Your demented ideas and Daric's powers are a dangerous combination. I'm only glad he can't change living things. Who know what creature you'd come up with? Oh, give me a break, Meredith retorted. It's my wedding day. Did you really have to have me dress up like Belle? Jade asked as she twirled in her yellow maid of honor ball gown. Meredith narrowed her eyes as she looked at Jade. Do you think Sebastian would mind if I had Daric whip him up a new outfit? He's getting really good at creating clothes. Don't even think it, Jade warned, knowing what Meredith was thinking. Not after the last time. There was a knock on the door and Lara walked in looking gorgeous in a blue Cinderella-inspired ball gown. At least Liam was game to dress up as Prince Charming, Meredith grumbled and turned around. How do I look? Beautiful, Mare, Lara said, her eyes shining with tears. Yes, Jade agreed. You look stunning. Although Ariel was her favorite Disney princess, Meredith nixed the idea of copying her wedding gown. So, instead she decided to go with an Ariel-inspired gown. It was a fitted bustier mermaid dress in white, but studded with sea-green Swarovski crystals and sequins shaped like scales. Not only did it look gorgeous, but the color reminded her of Daric's eyes. Thanks, she replied, snorting back the tears threatening to spill over. Oh, damn it. Thank God for waterproof mascara. Lara and Jade, already used to crying at a drop of a hat when all of them were together, pulled out their handkerchiefs and offered it to Meredith. Once the tears were dried, the three women composed themselves. Jade helped Meredith with the veil and Lara brought over her shoes so she could slip them on. Ready, Meredith? Came a voice from the door. Killian peeked in, his face breaking into a smile as his gaze landed on Meredith. You look beautiful, he beamed. Ah, don't get me started again, Meredith moaned as she felt the tears welling up again. We'll give you some privacy, Jade said, walking towards the door. Be ready in 5 though, Lara reminded them. Killian entered the room, moving aside so the two ladies could pass. He looked handsome in his black tux, but then again, Killian always looked striking in formal wear. Well, do I pass? He asked jokingly. Yeah, you'll do, she answered with a smile. She walked up to her brother and touched his arm. Are you okay, Killian? She asked with a frown. Yeah, I'm good, he replied with a smile, but Meredith saw that it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something was wrong with her brother, she knew it. The leader of their little family had always been laid back, smooth and charming, especially with the ladies. Meredith used to joke that he was James Bond in real life, and not just because of his skills. Ever since he came to New York, she could feel something was different. He hadn't even given any of the Lycan women at Fenrir a second glance, even though half of them were throwing themselves at him. If you need to talk about anything. I'm fine, Mare, he insisted. Let's get you hitched, okay? She nodded and took his arm. She wanted to know what Killian was hiding, but she knew better than to pry. He would tell her when the time was right. God, I can't believe you're getting married, Quinn moaned. He and Connor were waiting just outside the door. Who the hell would want to tie themselves to one person? How stupid. Plus, neither of you have a last name, did you realize that? Oh, shut up, Meredith replied. I hope you fall in love with a girl who won't take your shit and make you work for her. I don't think I'll be able to stop laughing when that day comes. Never gonna happen. Sure. She turned to Connor. He looked uncomfortable in his tux and was tugging at the collar. You look great, Connor. I look stupid in this monkey suit, he growled. Meredith laughed and walked over to him, adjusting the tie that had gone crooked. You look amazing. The ladies'll go crazy for you. Quinn guffawed. Or at least you won't scare them away too much. Meredith shot him a warning look. Yeah, sure, Connor shrugged. I wish Archie were here, Meredith said quietly. I know, Killian added. But I'd like to think he's around somehow. They buried Archie next to his wife at their family plot a few days after the confrontation with Stefan and the Mages. It was a small memorial attended only by the 4 lone wolves, Daric, and a few people from the Portland clan, including their alpha. Come on, everyone's waiting for us, Quinn said, turning around quickly, but not before Meredith noticed his eyes getting misty. She linked arms with Connor and Killian as they followed Quinn down the end of the hallway that led to the outside lawn. It was a beautiful day for a fall wedding in Portland. The leaves had fully turned, and the woods outside the mansion where the 4 lone wolves grew up and were bursting in golds and reds. As the quartet began to play, Lara and Jade walked down the aisle. Guests filled up all the chairs on either side, most from New York, but a few of the Lycans from the area had been invited too. Then the music changed. signaling for everyone to stand. The bride came down the aisle, escorted by her 3 brothers, and everyone clapped and cheered. When they got to the end, Daric was waiting for them with Sebastian and Liam standing next to him. Meredith thought he looked super hot in his gray tux and his shortly cropped hair. After they came back from Norway, she nearly jumped out of her skin when she walked into his bathroom and saw Daric from behind, his hair newly chopped off. She joked that she thought he was someone else and that now she had a new boyfriend. When he asked her later that night if she still wanted him to regrow his hair, she giggled and said she'd think about it. Vivienne Chatrain was waiting for them at the altar and performed a traditional witch-binding ceremony and blessing. Once it was all over and she declared them man and wife, Meredith quickly wrapped her arms around Daric and pulled him down for a kiss. She didn't even stop when Quinn loudly said that she was supposed to wait for the signal that groom could kiss the bride. Daric, on the other hand, was startled, but eagerly returned his new wife's kiss. When they broke away, Daric saw Alina in the front row fanning herself, and she gave him a wink. The reception was in full swing, with a full band playing classic tunes and Meredith dancing with all her brothers, even Connor, who seemed strangely graceful on the dance floor. Daric took his mother for a couple of dances as well, and she beamed proudly the whole time. She also shyly introduced them to her date for the evening, a handsome older gentleman named Merrick, who was old friend of Graham and Vivianne's. Well, Mingcher, Daric said as their dance ended and he guided her off the dance floor. Did I give you the wedding of your dreams? Yeah, it almost made up for your proposal, she said dryly. I suppose I've learned my lesson to never be romantic, he replied. Ha! I love that you brought me back to your village like I asked, Meredith began. But now I know never to take you to exotic places when the season premiere of Game of Thrones is dropping. At least not someplace without Wi-Fi. We're not savages, she joked as they sat down at their table, where a chocolate fountain was set up no more than an arm's length away from Meredith. Have you both gotten enough chocolate? Daric said, slipping a hand over her stomach. I swear, our child might come out made of chocolate at this point. Not nearly, no, she said, as she took a bite of a chocolate-covered strawberry. She offered Daric the remaining piece, and he swallowed it in one gulp. This is amazing, baby, she said as she looked around them surrounded by their family and clan. Grant had given her a full pardon as her reward for saving Zac Frost, but as soon as he released her from her bond to the New York clan, she pledged to them. They were now hers as much as she was theirs. I'm glad you're happy, he said. He turned to the left and saw his new brothers-in-law walking towards them. I think you're about to be even happier. What? She asked. She looked at the 3 men approaching them and then back at her new husband. Something going on? What did you see? Nothing, he said. Just a conversation I overheard today. The 3 lone wolves came up to them, shaking Daric's hands and giving their sister a hug. Meredith, we wanted to wait until after the ceremony to tell you something. Killian began. What is it? Her brother could hardly contain his smile. Sebastian offered us all jobs back in New York. What? She asked incredulously. She looked at Connor and Quinn, who both nodded. We'll be running an offshoot of his company. We'll be doing special ops for Creed Security, using our skills to help his clients. And when we're not going on ops for him, we'll be helping those lone wolves find their families, Quinn added, and make sure it doesn't happen again. So, anyone. Oh my God, Meredith cried, hugging all her brothers. That means you'll be living in New York. The Alpha is granting us special permission to stay in the city, Killian continued. Yeah, well, we can't miss our first nephew or niece's birth, can we? Quinn said. Connor nodded. We gotta make sure he or she has all the right skills. Not that you'll need our help raising the pup. You'll both be great parents. Killian's face softened, and Meredith didn't miss the hitch in his voice. Ah, you guys. Ow, Mare. Quinn complained when she hugged them again. Watch the suit. Ladies, I gotta go meet. Ha, she laughed. Fine. Go then. I guess I'll be seeing more of your ugly faces soon. With a last nod to Daric, the 3 men left. Meredith turned back to her new husband. I hope you're okay with them staying. What? Of course I am. If it makes you happy, it makes me happy. Besides, I think Connor doesn't hate me as much now that I've made an honest woman of you. Right, she giggled. And are you happy? She asked quietly. Of course. He drew her onto his lap and pressed his lips to her neck, making her moan. I once thought that you would be a weakness, a distraction. And now you are my world. Daric, she whispered. I love you. I love you too, Meredith. Extended epilogue. 5 years later. Oh my God! Elena exclaimed as her eyes grew wide and her gaze landed at the women in front of her. None of you breathe on me. I swear if I have to spend another Christmas pregnant, I'm going to scream. Dr. Faulkner has come up with some sort of Lycan true mate birth control. Stat. She put down her youngest, 6-month-old Knox in the bassinet beside the couch. Daric laughed and Meredith giggled as he rubbed her growing belly. Beside them, Jade was talking to Lara over video chat on her phone. The Lycan scientist was about 5 months along with her third child, while Lara was in the hospital, already in labor with her and Liam's second. Katie was patiently waiting for her turn on the phone with Lara, sitting comfortably on the couch, with a plate of half-eaten cake on her very pregnant stomach. She would be giving birth any day now too, to her and Nick's fourth baby. The twins came after Zachary, and now everyone was betting that Lara would be having twins as well. Meredith may or may not have had a little bit of help from her husband when she placed her bet. It was a long summer weekend, and as such they all ventured out to the Anderson mansion on Long Island for a barbecue. Daric enjoyed weekends like this when he could just relax and spend time with his family. His work with Jade in the lab at Fenrir was satisfying and kept him busy, but he wanted nothing more than to just spend time with his wife and their 2 children. Soon to be 3. Meredith was now one Grant's head lieutenant, effectively second in command of the Lycan security force, after Nick Frost. What's wrong, Elena? Grant asked as he and Frankie sat down next to Katie on the couch. The Lupa was the only other female currently not pregnant. She and Grant already had 3 of their own, twins and a young daughter who was 2.5 years old. Aren't you happy to be doing your duty to the Lycan race? Oh, I've done my duty all right, I've done it 4 times, she exclaimed, referring to her and Alex's 4 children. 4 times. Alex interjected as he joined them. He was sweaty from playing with the children who were now being watched over by Sebastian. I think we've done it more than that. He bent down to kiss his wife. Not that I'm counting. Not that, pervert. Grant groaned. I don't want to hear this. Grant, your sister is a married woman with 4 kids, Frankie said playfully. You know she has sex. Lots of down and dirty sex with her hot husband. This can't be a mystery to you after all this time. La la la. Grant stuck his fingers in his ears, not listening. Oh yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Super Alpha Lycan pheromones? Elena quipped. I would say half the time you guys trigger us, and she nodded to her kids. At least 2 of those are a result. And maybe this, Nick said as he came over, rubbing Katie's belly affectionately. Hey, we got those special seals installed in our apartment in Grant's office after we got married, Frankie said. You guys, she said pointedly at Alex. And Nick, did that on your own? I'm hungry, baby, Meredith said to Daric, her eyes pleading. You're always hungry, he retorted. When Meredith gave him a pout, he kissed her forehead. I'll get you some burgers. Yay, she said, raising her fist in triumph. With mayo and ketchup. And extra pickles, Daric finished. I know. He stood up and walked over to the grill where the burgers and hot dogs were keeping warm. As he piled a plate with food, something hit him on the ankle. Looking down, he saw a red ball by his feet. Oh, hello, Zach. He greeted the young boy as he bent down. Little Zachary Vrost looked up at him and smiled. Hiya, Unca Daric, he greeted, his light blue eyes sparkling and chubby little cheeks pink from running. Daric picked up the ball and held it out to Zach. As he reached for his toy, the little boy tumbled forward, and Daric quickly caught him before he hit the ground. As his hands touched Zach, he was taken aback by the vision that came to him. A tall, handsome man with ice blue eyes dressed in a tux. A young woman with long blonde hair and amber eyes in a white gown. The man whispered something in the woman's ear as they danced under fairy lights, and her face broke into a familiar smile. He couldn't hear what the man said, but he caught one word. A name. Her name. Hey, you alright, bud? Nick said as he stood over them. Sorry about that. The beta said sheepishly. I swear you can't take your eyes off them for a second, right? Having 2 boys of his own, Daric agreed. Yes, indeed. He picked up Zach and then handed him to his father. Thanks, Nick said as he took Zach. He gave Daric a grateful nod before walking away to join the rest of the children, who were now piling on top of Sebastian as they played their favorite game, Catch the Dragon. Daric wasn't close friends with Nick and Katie, but over the years they had come to some peace and understanding, and they all treated each other with respect and kindness. He accepted that there would always be some distance between him and Ross, but he didn't mind because he was plenty happy with his family and circle of friends. He wondered what the beta would think if he knew what Daric had seen in little Zach's future. Hey, what took you so long? Meredith asked as he sat down. Sorry, Minkshare, he apologized. I had to make sure I got all your condiments. Ooh. She made grabby hands at him, and he gave her the plate. Grabbing the hamburger, she took a big bite. So, good. Slow down, he laughed. I don't want you to choke. Oh yeah, tell that to your son or daughter, she said through a mouthful of food. With one last gulp, she devoured the entire burger. Daric sat down next to her and took the empty plate, placing it aside. He put a hand on her stomach. I've thought of a name. Really? She asked. Boy or girl? Girl. How do you know? Meredith asked, her eyes widening. While she loved their sons, Daric always knew she longed for a little girl to spoil and introduce to Disney princess movies. Is this one different from the boys? Can you see her future? He shook his head. No, I'm still unable to see visions from you or our children, he said. But I have a good feeling about this one. So what's the name? Astrid. Meredith thought for a moment. I like it. What does it mean? It's a traditional Scandinavian name, Daric explained. It means godly strength or divine beauty. He had no doubt of the beauty part, but the strength would be something she would need. It's settled then, she said. If it's a girl, I mean. Daric drew her closer, and she laid her head on his shoulders, enjoying the cool summer breeze and the laughter of children around.